So today we're going to go over a ton of UI topics that go beyond just a simple health bar and a score for the player. We're going to make this scrolling selection UI that has an animated icon for the focused button. And since this video is so long with so many different topics, I'm going to put a title at the top of the screen with the current topic for the duration of the video. And in the description, there'll be a table of contents complete with timestamps. So to get started, I imported the images that I'm going to use. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select them all, and I'm going to go to the imports. Since I have pixel art, I'm going to turn the filter off. I'm going to re-import them all. I'm going to also set this preset as the default for texture, so if I import more images, they will not have the filter on. So let's go ahead and get some nodes going. Then I'm going to rename some of these, that way they make a little bit more sense. So quickly, what this is this is just the main container to hold everything. My background, I want to be able to scroll through my grid. Here is these two make my grid, and this container holds everything that goes along with the button, including the name of the animal and the price that it will cost. This highlight we are going to be turning on and off, so you know which animal is selected. The first thing we will do is we're actually going to save this branch as a scene because we're going to want to have multiple characters. We're also going to add a UI folder, then the icon container. So here, open up the scene. The name, the first one will be a chestnut horse. And for our texture, we're actually going to use an atlas texture because my images are not all consistent in their shape and size or how many animals are on them. So we're going to use an atlas texture to pick out which ones we want. We will pick out the texture region. I will snap it to a grid snap. I know that I have 48 by 48 images, and I will just take that middle one. You do not see the horse yet because we have not given it a minimum size yet. Do that right now. 48 by 48, and this panel is in front of it. We're actually going to set that behind to show behind the parent. We'll just throw a price in there for like 600 real quick, and we will want the alignment on both of these to be center. I would also like this to center. We're going to add a theme. I'm going to make a new theme. We'll go ahead and save it as the UI theme. And one of the things I want to add is a default font. To get a font, I just went to Google Fonts. I just picked out a random font that'll be easy for my kids to read. And then after you pick out your font, you take the TTF file, you put it in here, and then in the settings, to make it pop a little bit more, we're going to actually put a dark outline. We're going to make it about 3. That way we can see what's going on a little bit better. So that only changed the theme for the name. A trick that you can do, instead of having to put the theme on everything, you can go to the parent, and the children should inherit the theme that you give the parent. So that are automatically updated the price. That's a good just rough start on our icon that we're going to have. We'll go back to our main UI. So we're going to be adding a whole bunch of these icon containers to the rows in this grid. We will save this as the purchase UI. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to anchor our parent node to a full rect, and then the background is going to be bottom wide, and we're actually going to pull that up a little bit, because we're going to want that to be where the UI really resides. And then this is going to go to the center. So after you center the scroll container, you'll notice that you don't really see anything except for a couple little scroll icons. And what'll make it a bit easier to see what's going on, we will turn off the clip content. Since we're not clipping the content, it doesn't really matter how big this is, and I would not make it any larger than this button, just because it'll mess with the focus of the scrolling. If you do have the clip content on, you'll have to make it big enough to actually see stuff. And then the next thing we need to do is get rid of these ugly little scrolls. You can make the scrolls look nice, but I'm actually just going to make them disappear by going to the theme, and it's a little bit confusing, but we're going to add class items. And instead of actually going to the scroll container, we are going to go to the H scrollbar, and that adds the scrollbar settings over to the side here under the font to styles. And the scroll
we will go to style box empty, and that should just make it disappear and you can't interact with it anymore. And then we also have to do that for the vertical scroll bar. So now those should be gone for the scroll container. While we're in the theme, we're actually just going to add class, and we had a panel that was behind our icon. So in the panel, we will add a new style box flat. We're going to add a border on each side. Border is going to be a nice little yellow to really highlight that that's our selected animal. We'll add some corner to it. Our background color will make it a little bit brighter, but make it a little bit more transparent. Close up the theme because we're done with that for now. We have the scroll enabled, but even if we add a couple, we'll just duplicate this. That should add another row. We'll duplicate these a couple times. When you play this, if you click the arrow keys, nothing is happening. Because none of them actually have focus right now. We'll make a script here and add a very simple line of code where we have the function ready. So then we will come over here and we will copy the node path, and we'll go back to the script. We will paste that back in. We have to put a $sign at the beginning so that way it likes it. But this HBox container cannot actually grab focus. So if you remember, if we look at this scene, the button itself is actually called icon. So we're going to find node icon and grab focus. So just to see if we are actually grabbing focus on a button, we will go to focused. We will add another atlas texture. I actually have another one of horses running. If texture region doesn't pop up right away, sometimes you have to click onto a different node and back to the texture button to actually get the texture region to pop up. These guys are 64 by 64. So now when we run our program, you see there's a little horsey that's actually in front of the previous texture, which obviously isn't what we want. So apparently when you add a texture to the focused slot, it doesn't actually replace the normal texture when it's focused. It does an overlay. So that's why you still see the standing horse and the running horses over the top of it. So to switch the image of the horse when it's focused compared to when it's not focused, and also to animate the horses running, we're going to use an animation player, which we're actually going to go over just a little bit later in the video. We are not scrolling like we wanted to, which the scrolling part is the easy thing to fix. We go to our scroll container and we do follow focus, and it should jump to each button that you want. Now again, if your scroll container is too large, it won't actually follow the way that you want to. You'll just have to play around with it a little bit to see what I mean. But if the button that gains focus is still within the bounds of the scroll container, it will not move. So I prefer just to make the scroll container small and leave clipping off. So I'm actually going to click this little anchor. That way it moves the anchors instead of the margins. And I'm going to just move the scroll container up a bit. We're actually going to turn the follow focus off. We are going to scroll this container manually using a tween. So if you remember, we still have this horizontal scroll and this vertical scroll, and we're going to access that with a tween and move it at a more reasonable speed opposed to instantly. So since we made this icon container a different scene, it's a little bit difficult to make the signal go directly from that button all the way back to the purchase UI. You could just tell this icon to find the parent of the parent of the parent until you get to the scroll container, but that's kind of bad practice. We're going to take a note from GDQuest and make an event bus. So what we're going to do is, it's very simple. We're going to make a new script. We're going to call it events. We're just going to make a signal called update purchase UI. We're going to go to the project settings. We're going to go to the auto load. We will grab the events GD and we will add it. It is going to be called events connected to our purchase UI in the ready function. So that calls up that script.connect, and we're going to connect update purchase UI with ourself, and we'll make a function called update purchase UI. I need to make quotes. Also, it can't connect if it doesn't have a function. As you can see, I underscored before it. We will just pass along a node to it, and the node that will be passed along will go events, emit signal, update purchase UI, and we're just going to send ourselves along. That way it has the coordinates and everything that it needs. So we'll go back here. We need to add a tween. Since we'll be calling the tween multiple times, we'll just make a variable for it here. We'll do an onReady scroll container. And if you don't know what it's called, you can always go here and hover scroll horizontal. And the initial value is, we will just get the scroll container dot scroll horizontal, so whatever it is currently at. Then we'll go to the node rect position.x. It's going to take 0.3 seconds. We will do a tween quad, and we will ease in. I know there's a lot going on, but we'll go ahead and just copy and paste. So now the difference between this one is we're going to have tween interpolate property. It's still going to be the scroll container, except we want the scroll vertical and the scroll vertical. And instead of the node rect position.x, we actually need to get parent, and we're going to get the rect position.y. 0.3 seconds is fine, and transquad and ease in is okay. Now the reason why we have to get the parent of this node is if we look here, we're getting the rect position of this node, which is relative to the parent. Well, if the node that we're going to is in the second row, it's still relatively the same to its parent as the first row. So if this is at 0, 0, this one is also at 0, 0 relative to its parent. So we actually want to get this hbox container so that way it tells us what relative distance it is to the vbox container, which will be the rows, opposed to these icons that won't tell us anything. Now the most important thing that I always forget is you need to do tween.start, and let's see if it works. As a comparison, see how that's a little bit nicer? Okay, so quickly, we're just going to add a background, add a gradient texture, we'll add a new gradient. We'll look here, we'll add something in the middle, something like a nice blue. But I'll bring the alpha down quite a bit. Then we can copy and paste this and go to this one, and we will just paste that in. Click enter. Now, the next little trick I'll show you is when it gets above this area here, I don't actually want to see everything. So, the first thing we will do is on the background, so not the scroll container, because the scroll container we don't want to clip the content. That way we can see it outside of this little box, but this background container, I clip the content, that way it can't go outside of this rectangle. Another thing that you can add is if you add a light 2D to this scroll container, it's going to ask you for a texture. You can go into Krita and make a quick little texture. So in Krita, I'm just going to make a new file, make a 400 by 400. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come unlock the background, and then I'm going to delete it. Cut layer, that works too. Then, I often like to turn the grid on, that way I can kind of see exactly where the center is. I'm going to pick a very white color, it has to be white, and we will go to gradients, and instead of it being a linear gradient, you want it to be a radial gradient, and just go to the center, draw a line to the edge, and boom. We have white in here. Now I want the middle to be a little bit whiter, so I'm going to also make a secondary smaller circle to make everything in the middle a little bit white. And I'm actually going to do it one more time. Then we will save this as a PNG. After that, we can just quit out of Krita so it doesn't burn up my computer. Then let's click the folder that we want, because that's the important part of importing assets. It's whatever folder is currently selected, and then we can just drag this into any part of Godot, it will add it in, and we will be able to add that light mask to the texture. As you can see, and you don't want to have the texture too small, otherwise it'll clip out stuff that you want. And so make the texture nice and big, or the light, I should say. And what this is going to do when you have it on mask is it'll fade stuff that goes to the side. So if I go in here and I add a whole bunch of these duplicates with Control D, and it goes way off to the side, you'll be able to see the effect of that light a little bit better. One of the things that I forgot to do here was the highlight panel. We don't want that on all the time. We only want that on when it's focused. So let's go back to the focused entered, and we will add just a couple lines of code. Icon highlight dot show. It's a function. Icon highlight dot hide. Now it should only be the one that we have currently focused. Another thing I'd like to try is to make the icon grow a little bit when it's focused. So let's do var focused size. We'll make that a vector 2. So a couple quick things about making the image bigger when it is focused. You have to have expand on. We're going to leave the stretch mode to scale. And down here we're going to have shrink to center. That tells the parent, so the icon is telling the icon container that it should shrink and put it in the middle, or center it basically, both vertically and horizontally. So then what you end up with is this. Another thing that we can do to make the focused image pop just a little bit more is we can fade out all of the words that aren't being used right now. Go back to the script. Name modulate is equal to color. And when it is not focused, we will set the alpha to 0.2. So as you can see, we have to set it originally to the 0.2. So to do that, we will go to name, we will go to visibility, modulate, and instead of having this be 255, we will switch it to raw, and except for the one that we're looking at will be highlighted basically, and we can do the same for the money. Something that you also can do is you can copy params, paste params. I guess that also copy and pasted the text, but that's easy enough to switch back. So then we will do copy, paste, price, copy, paste, price. And actually, it really makes the focused icon pop. Let's go back to animation of the said horse. I'll add an animation player.
So then we're going to add a new animation. Pin the animation player here so it stays here. We'll go to the icon. We'll go back to the animation tab down here. We're actually going to keyframe the atlas, and then we will also keyframe the region. Then we're going to make another animation, and I have a different atlas for this, and we'll go to the texture region. Unfortunately, these are different pixel sizes, and that'll cause some problems, but nothing that we can't overcome. We're actually going to keyframe this first one, keyframe the atlas first, then the region. Then I'm actually going to move ahead and go back to the texture region. We will have to keep going back and forth between the tabs. And I actually want this to only be 0.8 second. And if we play this, the running one, we will want it to loop. And as you see up here, it's sliding through. And that is obviously not what we want. We want the region to be discrete. So now you can see up here, it is working. In the inspector, it is not working. And even if we play the scene, it will not be running quite yet. Atlas textures, you have to manually update the texture, and how we're going to do that is we will add a track, call method track. We're going to be going to the icon container, and then in the icon container script, we will add a function called update icon image. We'll just call icon.update. You have to save this script, and then when you come down to the animation, you can insert a key, and we will update icon image, and we will select this key, move to the next spot, and we will click Control D, and that should duplicate it. And we'll move to the next spot, we'll click Control D, duplicate, and duplicate. So then after we save this, and after we add all those updates in, if we run the scene, then our horse will be running. Now, a problem that I ran into multiple times, you can see it kind of glitching as I go through it. Also, these horses are running, they're not supposed to be, and I have all types of glitches happening. Since I'm using different sizes of textures for my atlases and the region is moving, it's not updating fast enough when it changes animations. So how I fix that is you can actually call the animation, called it in the ready, and also when it is exited, because that's when all these problems are happening. You can call the advance function. You push the animation ahead 10 frames, and so it's already farther into the animation, and that solved my problem. And it works very smoothly now. So now to add this UI to our scene, we're going to add a canvas layer. Then in that canvas layer, we will add our purchase UI. So I've decided that this 2D light is a little bit redundant with me fading out the horses. So I'm actually going to hide that since it's not a control, is kind of causing problems. I'll show you. If it's bigger than the UI, is causing problems. And since, like I said, we're already fading out the horses, it doesn't really do that much. Right now, this is the UI. So obviously there's a long ways to go. My hotkeys for purchasing are also the hotkeys for moving my little character. Also, obviously I want different horses or different animals with different prices, and then I'm also going to have to link that with what's happening in the game. I will probably want this to appear and disappear when I go to a sign. That way they can pick what they're going to buy, but I'm going to have to save that for another video because this video is already very, very long. So if you have any questions, please leave them down in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.